2025 has been a big year for WWE NXT, particularly when it comes to major free agent signings, with the likes of Ricky Saints, Mariah May, Jordan Grace, and more, all making their WWE debut on WWE's developmental brand. With that being said, could more stars be on their way to WWE NXT in the future? In this video, we're going to let you know 5 possible next WWE NXT signings. Hey guys, welcome back to Wrestling News 365. Hope everyone is doing very well. As always, there are plenty of stories to get into in the world of professional wrestling, and today we're going to be talking about 5 potential WWE NXT signings that could be on their way to WWE's developmental brand very, very soon. As I mentioned, it's been a big year for signings in WWE NXT. We've seen names like Ricky Saints and Mariah May jump over to WWE. Of course, the former Ricky Starks and Mariah May becoming Ricky Saints and Blake Monroe. They jumping over after their AEW contracts expired or they were released from the company. Meanwhile, others like Jordan Grace have left TNA Wrestling and gone over to WWE, as well as others just signing after being free agents, not being necessarily affiliated with big companies like TNA Wrestling, AEW, New Japan Pro Wrestling, and or others. But, of course, this is pro wrestling. It always evolves. The question is always what is next and who is next? Could there be more signings arriving in WWE NXT before the year is said and done? Let's get into 5 potential names that could find themselves in WWE NXT fairly soon, beginning with former TNA World Champion Joe Hendry. Now, Hendry has been one of the real pioneers, flag wavers and bearers, if you will, of this working relationship between WWE and TNA Wrestling. Before it was really even made official, Joe Hendry was one of the first names that was over as part of the working relationship, appearing regularly on NXT. And at points throughout this year, despite still being a contracted TNA wrestler, Hendry's almost made more appearances for WWE, either on NXT, mainly, whenever you say his name, he appears, and even on WWE main roster PLEs. We've seen Hendry be the TNA World Champion and enter the Men's Royal Rumble match. We even saw him actually wrestle at WrestleMania against one of the biggest superstars in WWE history when he faced off against Randy Orton. Granted, it was in a losing effort and the match was done fairly quickly, but the fact that WWE and TNA for that matter, but certainly WWE, value him and view him that highly, to have him be in a featured spot with Randy Orton at WrestleMania, that shows you how high WWE views Joe Hendry. When Hendry made his WWE debut last year on NXT, I think it was the most viewed clip of the year on social media from WWE. That just goes to show the interest in Joe Hendry in WWE. Now, of course, he's a former TNA World Champion, and his ascension to becoming TNA World Champion really did coincide with him making these appearances on WWE NXT, challenging for the WWE NXT Championship. But as we get closer to the end of the year, we get closer to Joe Hendry's contract with TNA Wrestling expiring, and it's really one of the worst kept secrets in professional wrestling, isn't it? Once his contract expires with TNA Wrestling, Joe Hendry is going to sign a full-time WWE contract. Now, although, as I mentioned, he's still part of the TNA roster, Hendry has quickly become one of the most popular stars on NXT. Now, again, we've seen Hendry have multiple appearances and what have you. In a recent report that actually came out just a couple of months ago, actually, it was, a month ago, it was in September this report came out. It came from the Takedown on SI. It came from John Alba, who has very strong sources in TNA Wrestling. He hosts a podcast with Matt Hardy. He's got very good inroads into really high-quality news coming out of that organization. And he reported, as I mentioned a month ago, that sources within both TNA Wrestling and WWE have indicated that Joe Hendry is already largely being phased out of TNA programming. He's expected to become a full-time member of WWE as early as next year. It may even be before then. The report also indicated that Hendry has been regularly featured on WWE's programming, including house shows and NXT live events. Besides that report, the report also indicated that WWE's use of Hendry, they've been using that on their official recruitment page. He's been sporting a t-shirt bearing the logo of WWE as well. The report also cleared the fan speculation that he had already jumped ship by stating that TNA President Carlos Silva had told the publication that Hendry is still part of the TNA roster and they coordinate talent usage together with NXT. So as of right now, Hendry is still contracted to TNA Wrestling. His contract runs through the end of the year. But in 2026, Joe Hendry is going to be a full-time WWE superstar. The question is just going to be, how long does he spend on NXT? Does he even spend any time in NXT? Does he go straight to the main roster? He's been there regularly enough. I think he'll probably have at least a couple of months on WWE's developmental territory. But he's certainly a very safe bet for a future signing of WWE NXT. And before we get on to the next name on this countdown list, a reminder, this video is brought to you in collaboration with all of our great affiliates here at WrestleNews 365. That includes NordVPN. You can see right there, you can get up to 77% off plus 3 months extra. All you have to do is scan the QR code that's in the sidebar there, or you can use our custom link. That's nordvpn.com/WN365. Once again, nordvpn.com/WN365. If you're an NXT fan, you can watch all of your NXT programming as part of your Netflix subscription. You don't have to get on the CW. You don't have to get Peacock to watch NXT PLEs. You can watch that as part of your Netflix subscription, just like we do over here in the UK. All you've got to do is get a VPN, like NordVPN, change your location to an international territory, like in here in the UK, and you can watch Raw, SmackDown, NXT, main roster PLEs, NXT PLEs, Saturday night's main event for free on YouTube. It's all fantastic. You can save yourself some money. You can also support WrestleNews 365 in the process. We really appreciate your support. Now, the next name that could be on their way to WWE NXT soon is former AEW and Ring of Honor tag team The Righteous. Now, back in May, it was reported that The Righteous, Vincent, and Dutch were no longer part of All Elite Wrestling or Ring of Honor. The news was broken by Mike Johnson, a PW insider. It was reported that actually their exit really took place at the end of April, and they were moved from the AEW roster page. Now, they had officially signed with AEW and Ring of Honor back in March of 2023. They were previously part of ROH during the Sinclair Broadcast Group era of Ring of Honor. As part of that run, they held the Ring of Honor World Six-Man Tag Team Championships on multiple occasions. The Righteous was actually quite a big faction towards the end of ROH's run. And in AEW/ROH, they had limited success. Probably their most high-profile situation was with the whole Better Than You, Baby, and they were feuding with them over the Ring of Honor Tag Team Championships, and they were suggesting that someone was a liar, someone was the devil. It turned out it was Adam Cole. But that was about it. They were aligned with Jake Roberts for a very brief period there, but they never really had anything of a real substantive run, which was a shame considering a lot of people were fans of The Righteous, and WWE's interest in The Righteous goes back a long, long time, even prior to signing with AEW/Ring of Honor in 2023. They actually had a tryout with WWE in late 2022. This was when Triple H had just got creative control of WWE, and he was rehiring a lot of the previously released WWE superstars, and he was looking to bring in other talent as well. And then things kind of changed because Vince McMahon forced his way back in. There was an unofficial hiring freeze while they were looking for the merger or the acquisition of WWE by Endeavor and the merger with UFC to form TKO. But they did have a tryout with WWE in late 2022, The Righteous. They were actually even spotted, I don't think it was shown during the broadcast, but they were spotted in the crowd during an episode of WWE NXT during that time period. And there were rumors at the time that they were going to be part of this Wyatt Six faction. Of course, during that time period, Bray Wyatt had just returned to WWE at Extreme Rules in 2022. And with the introduction of Uncle Howdy and possibly a revamped new version of The Fiend, there was going to be a scenario whereby you had this, what has now become the Wyatt Six faction, but it was going to be led by Bray Wyatt, and new characters were going to be introduced, and Vincent and Dutch were going to possibly be a part of that. Obviously, didn't end up happening. As I mentioned, they went to AEW/ROH, but now they're no longer affiliated with any major company, and you can absolutely see Shawn Michaels wanting to work with Vincent and Dutch. There's huge creativity there. The vignettes in AEW/ROH were very, very interesting. Whether or not they end up in NXT or they go onto the main roster and they actually do end up with the Wyatt Six faction, because the Wyatt Six faction at this point is obviously doing its own thing, but it still is a tribute to the late Bray Wyatt, and the people that have been featured in that faction were people that Bray Wyatt wanted to work with when he returned in 2022, and maybe Vincent and Dutch are part of that as well. So maybe that would make them skip the NXT brand. We'll have to wait and see. But I think at some point in the relatively near future, I think we'll see Vincent and Dutch under contract with WWE. Next up, the Inspiration. Yes, the former Iconics, because they're on a roll and they're already appearing back on WWE programming. Now, the Inspiration returned to TNA Wrestling earlier this year, and it's been very successful for them. They're the current TNA Knockouts World Tag Team Champions, winning the titles a couple of weeks before Bound for Glory. They then retained their titles at Bound for Glory as well. They were a part of the TNA invasion of WWE NXT, if you will, and was part of the Women's Elimination match at NXT versus TNA Showdown on the CW a couple of weeks ago. And it was a real homecoming for them because, of course, they're probably best known for their time in WWE and, ironically enough, NXT as the Iconics. And it was such a popular gimmick that when they got called up to the main roster in WWE back in 2018, they were hugely popular. They were part of the segment which saw Carmella cash in her Women's Money in the Bank briefcase on Charlotte Flair and win the SmackDown Women's Championship on the post-WrestleMania edition of SmackDown. So they were very, very popular. And they were continuously very popular. And they had success in WWE. They won the Women's Tag Team Championships at WrestleMania 35 back in 2019. But then after that, they were split up during the pandemic, which no one really understood. Then you had One on Raw doing decent work. That was Peyton Royce, and you had Billie Kay was on SmackDown, and she actually had a quite fun gimmick handing out her resume at the time, but no one understood why they were split up. Eventually, they both got released by WWE. They went to TNA originally, back when they were Impact Wrestling, then decided they were going to take some time away, they were having children, and they were going on hiatus, but now they come back, and it's like they've never missed a beat. As I mentioned, they've already started appearing once again on NXT, but the critical thing here is their contracts, because it was reported prior to Bound for Glory that actually, when they returned to TNA Wrestling earlier this year, they actually signed really short-term deals, and their deals were set to expire after Bound for Glory. Now, the fact that the Inspiration had successfully retained the TNA Knockouts World Tag Team Championships against the Elegance brand at the TNA pay-per-view had maybe suggested some that there was a feeling that they were going to be sticking around with TNA, but as of last we heard anyway, their TNA contracts had expired, and they were currently working without contracts for the company. Now, Sean Ross Sapp in his report from Fightful Select did state that Inspiration and TNA officials, they're interested in continuing their partnership, and the expectation is that they could probably stick around in TNA Wrestling. But even if they do, a run continuously in NXT is not out of the question at all. They're the TNA Knockouts World Tag Team Champions. They've got history in NXT. So who's to say that they don't end up going back to NXT for a more prolonged run? I mean, we're really talking about signings here, but as long as they're not under contracts, we shall see. Whether or not WWE would really want to gazump TNA Wrestling, a working partner of theirs, and sign the Inspiration to contracts when TNA are looking to do that, I don't know. You have to also factor in, as I mentioned, the Inspiration. They're both mothers now, and the schedule's important too. So there's a lot of different factors to consider, but I don't think you can rule out a return of the Iconics to WWE NXT more full-time. Next up, Britt Baker, DMD. I mean, how many videos have we done talking about Britt Baker, talking about returns, exits, signings, and what have you? And every time I've done it, folks, the information right now on Britt Baker is exactly the same. 2024, Britt Baker, she returned at Forbidden Door for AEW. This was her return after over 9 months of hiatus. She interrupted Mercedes Moné. She then revealed on the following episode of Dynamite that she'd been sidelined by herniated discs, a torn hip labrum. Then she suffered a transient ischemic attack, which is almost like a stroke. It led to a match between Mercedes Moné and Britt Baker at All In, but how we got there, well, my goodness me, there was controversy in August of 2024, just like a couple of weeks after actually returning to AEW. It was reported that Britt Baker had been suspended. There was a backstage altercation with MJF and his then girlfriend, Alicia Atout, of course, now wife. So she was suspended for a couple of weeks. She came back, had a match with Mercedes Moné at AEW All In, lost. We then didn't see her for a couple of months. Then she returned in November. She defeated Penelope Ford on an episode of Dynamite. Afterwards, she was confronted by Serena Deeb. And Baker responded by saying, nobody cares, nobody cares, nobody cares, towards Deeb and the camera. And as of October 2025, that's the last we saw of Britt Baker in AEW. That was nearly a year ago. Nothing. We've seen nothing. Now, there have been numerous reports and false claims that she'd been gone from the company, been let go from the company. As of the time recording this video, she's still under contract to AEW. There have been reports and suggestions that maybe Tony Khan and people of senior authority in AEW have basically just had enough of Britt Baker and had enough of the backstage drama. And considering all of the backstage drama there has been in AEW throughout its short history, they're just not really interested in adding to it. But she's still under contract, because I think the assumption is that once they let her go, she's probably going to end up in WWE. Now, as of the last sort of comment that we heard regarding Britt Baker and a possible departure from AEW, what have you, we did hear the AEW president, Tony Khan, talk about her in the build-up to AEW All in Texas. This was back in July on a media call. Now, he shut down rumors that she was looking to leave the promotion. He said at the time, quote, "I've never had a conversation about Britt departing AEW. I like Britt a lot." He then used this sports team analogy to explain why certain talented wrestlers like Baker may not be featured on television at all times. He said, quote, "On a baseball team, you use 9 players at a time. In the NFL, you put 11 in at a time. Pro wrestling is unique because you can use a different number of people, but there are still only so many slots to fill into a show. We haven't used everybody, and there are some really talented people on our bench that we can call in that would be a great part of the show. I absolutely think that applies to a number of women and men that are not necessarily being featured right now." He then said, quote, "Britt is a great example of somebody that's very talented and we could utilize in AEW with the right situation and at the time. Just like in pro sports, when you have some really talented people that aren't necessarily starting every game, at that point doesn't mean they won't be starting in the future. It makes sense for me to look at the AEW roster like a sports team and try and manage the minutes and rotation. But there's managing minutes and then there's not being featured on the show at all." So the general feeling is that Baker is probably done in AEW. This might be a similar situation to, say, Rey Fenix, Penta, Ricky Starks and others, whereby the general feeling is that they're going to leave, they're going to end up going to WWE. So the decision is kind of made, well, why would we continue to feature someone on television? That is going to leave us fairly soon and jump to our rival. We're better off investing our precious TV time and money into talents that are going to be sticking around and aren't a problem backstage. So with that kind of forecast, you do feel that Baker's probably, regardless if it happens sooner rather than later, or later rather than sooner, she's on her way out of All Elite Wrestling, and once she goes, she'll probably find herself in WWE. I think following the trajectory of other top AEW talents that have signed with WWE, I think she probably ends up in NXT, similar to Ricky Saint, similar to Blake Monroe, who was one of the biggest AEW female talents that they had. I think that she probably ends up in NXT first, and then ends up on the main roster. And finally, Mike Santana. We spoke earlier on about Joe Hendry, the former TNA World Champion, possibly, most likely, being on his way to WWE next year. Well, what about Mike Santana, the current TNA World Champion? I know you'll say, oh, he's only just won the TNA World Championship. He's not going to go to WWE. Well, there have been numerous reports this year that during his appearances on WWE NXT, because like several other TNA talents, Mike Santana has appeared on NXT numerous times, multiple times, challenging for TNA World titles, challenging in main events. And as of June, this was even prior to him winning the TNA World Championship, according to a report from PW Insider, there was reportedly a lot of internal talk within WWE and NXT about Mike Santana and potential interest in him. He's received high works for his work in NXT so far, and every single time he does have a match or makes an appearance, reportedly, his stock grows even higher in WWE. As I've said, he still just won the TNA World Championship in the main event of Bound for Glory, TNA's biggest show of the year. So the expectation would be he's going to be sticking around in TNA wrestling for some time. He's going to be the new flag bearer of that company, with Joe Hendry looking to depart at the end of the year. The big thing, though, when it comes to Santana, we don't have a ton of information about his contract. There had been a report in the summer, as I've said, that he was under contract to TNA through the end of the year. He did sign a contract with the company in April of 2024. Of course, prior to that, Santana worked for AEW as part of the Santana and Ortiz tag team. He had previously been in Impact Wrestling prior to arriving in AEW, of course, and he bet on himself. He wasn't happy with not being featured on AEW television. Ortiz was saying, look, we've got a good thing here, why ruin it? And it led to them falling out. But Mike Santana's come off better. He bet on himself as a singles talent. He's gone to TNA. He's got over so much that he's their world champion, over so much that WWE, most likely when Santana's contract is up, they're going to at least make an attempt to sign him. So it's worked out for him, certainly. The biggest question is, like I said, is Just how long does he have left on his contract? Has he signed a new one? You would think with the promotion putting the World Championship on him, it would be bizarre if he then dropped the championship in the next couple of months and ended up signing with WWE. So I feel like he probably sticks around until at some point next year. But contracts are contracts and timing is everything. So we'll have to wait and see if Santana finds his way on WWE NXT permanently. So there you go, guys. There are 5 possible signings that could be on their way to WWE NXT in the near future. Let me know your thoughts about it in the comment section below. Which ones are more likely than others? Let me know your opinions, your hot takes, your thoughts as always. Be sure to smash a like on the like button. Be sure to subscribe, bottom right-hand corner, and I'll speak to you again very, very soon.
Hey guys, thank you for watching, listening, streaming, or however you come across this video today. Be sure to click on the video on the right there to watch our next video, or click the bottom there to subscribe, or the bottom right hand corner. Thank you very much, and I'll speak to you again very soon.